Chapter 1. The Big Man. George. George was a man of impressive stature, both physically and in terms of status. He held a high position in a large corporation, making decisions that affected the careers of dozens of people. In the office, he was respected, feared, even hated by some, but no one dared to oppose him. One day, a judge came to the company for an internal audit. Not a courtroom judge, but someone authorized to monitor ethical standards and internal order. His name was Andre. He was smart, meticulous, and had a sharp sense of humor, which seemed to irritate George. During a meeting, Andre gave a report on misconduct in management. He spoke professionally, without emotion, but ended with a sharp joke aimed at those who think they're too big to fail. The room chuckled. George didn't. "Are you trying to mock me?" George asked, towering over Andre like a mountain. "I'm not mocking, I'm exposing," Andre replied calmly. "Sometimes with humor, it helps people accept the truth." That was Andre's last day at the company. "Fire him," George told his assistant. "Immediately." But every action has consequences. Andre's dismissal sparked a wave of unrest. People began to talk, to share stories, to unite. A few months later, an external investigation began, and when real judges walked into George's office with a warrant, he realized no one is too big to fall. Chapter 2. The Fall of a Giant. 3 months had passed since George fired Andre. Everything seemed to return to normal, at least on the surface. George still walked the hallways as if nothing had happened. His suit was immaculate, his voice firm, and every step echoed through the office like a gavel striking wood. But something had shifted. A tension hung in the air. Whispers, questions, suspicion. First, a finance department employee handed over documents to the union. Then someone in HR quietly told a journalist about an old case of illegal layoffs. People who once trembled in George's shadow began to realize he wasn't untouchable. Andre, meanwhile, didn't fade into the background. He started speaking in podcasts, interviews, and ethics conferences. His story spread through social media. He wasn't angry, just honest. And honesty, it turned out, had power. When the external investigation finally arrived, George laughed it off. "Baseless accusations," he told his board. "I've got everything under control." But then the warrant came, and men in suits, real ones, not for show, seized his computers, locked him out of the servers, and took his phone. That day, Andre sat quietly in a cafe across the street, sipping black coffee. He smiled when he saw George being escorted out. Not out of spite, not of peace, because the truth, like water, always finds a crack. Chapter 3. Echoes. A month passed since George was taken out of the office in handcuffs. The company felt frozen in place. Without him, the system began to creak like an old ship without a captain. Andre, once fired at the snap of a finger, had become an unlikely symbol. Universities and conferences began inviting him to speak. He wasn't seeking fame, he just shared what others were afraid to say. At one event, a middle-aged woman approached him. She had sharp eyes and a calm voice. "You probably don't remember me," she said. "I'm Larissa. I worked in the department where George fired almost the entire team for poor performance." No one knew then that he was just covering up a financial scam. Andre nodded. "I remember now. That was in 2019? "Yes," she said. "I want to help. I saved copies of the documents back then. I was scared, but now I see the time has come." A team began to form around Andre. Lawyers, former employees, investigative journalists. People George had once silenced were now united. Not for revenge, but for justice. And maybe to restore faith in the system. Meanwhile, George sat in silence. Not in a cell, and the trial was still ongoing. He was under house arrest. A large house, quiet halls, no ringing phones. His world, once filled with charts, pressure, and power, had vanished. He missed the sound of the office, the sound of authority. Now only silence remained. One day, his lawyer visited. George hoped for good news, but the older man shook his head. This will be tough. Evidence is piling up. You had a chance to stop this early, but now everything's coming out. They won't understand, George said hoarsely. I kept that company afloat. They didn't see how it would have crumbled without a firm hand. Sometimes you need to be ruthless to keep order. The lawyer sighed. Sometimes you need to be human to earn respect. The scales of truth. The hearings began. Reports, testimonies, revelations, accusations of manipulation, labor violations, and covering up crimes. George still stood tall in court, his voice steady. But inside he knew. This wasn't about money or control anymore.